We actually have it up here, if that's accurate. Okay. Good evening and welcome to the regular school board meeting for District 833. Today is Thursday, January 23rd, 2020. Our superintendent's birthday. It is 6:30 p.m. We are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. 1.0 is roll call.
Melinda Doles.
Here.
Louise Hines.
Here.
Simi Patnaik.
Here.
Pat Driscoll.
Present.
Sharon Van Leer.
Present.
Katie Schwartz.
Here.
Tracy Brunette.
Here.
Maya Mayer.
Here.
Hannah Poor is absent. Emily Thompson.
Here. Thank you. 2.0, please rise and join us for Pledge of Allegiance. Three point oh is the approval of our agenda, and I will entertain a motion, but we are adding a closed session pursuant to Minnesota statute 13D.03 for labor negotiations. So I'll entertain a motion with that addition.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Sharon, second by Katie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. 4.0 are our district highlights, and Dr. Jacobus is going to be introducing our new Director of Communications.
Great. I'm pleased to introduce Pepe Barton, who is running around right now making sure that this meeting goes well. There he is, and I'd ask you to just come to the podium if you have a minute to. Mr. Barton comes to us from the St. Paul Public Schools, where he worked in the communication department there for a number of years, and before that time he was in media and in the news media, working with reporters and relations, media relations. So he has a deep breadth of knowledge, and we're really pleased to have him here. Some of the things that he's dealt with before, he was able to come in right away, and it's particularly snow. That's something he's worked on and has helped us refine our processes, and he gives us another really good look at communications, and I think it'll enhance the work that we try to do and moving forward. So I'm pleased to have you here and give you a chance to say anything you'd like to, and at about 30 minutes.
Well, I'm happy to join South Washington County Schools. I've just been here a month, so I'm still learning a whole lot. There's a whole lot of things that are similar to my previous role in St. Paul and things that are very different in South Washington County Schools. And so one of my next steps is to actually get out to all the schools if the superintendent doesn't keep me too busy here, and learn about all of the unique things that are happening in our schools, which, with our current communication staff and of course our three new board members, we're kind of all learning together, so I'm looking forward to continuing that for years to come. So thank you.
Welcome. All right, now Kelly Jansen, Director of Teaching and Learning, will introduce our new Director of Program Evaluation, Research, and Assessment.
Good evening, Chair Burnett, Superintendent Jacobus, board members, and student reps. I am pleased to be here tonight to introduce John Lindner. He is our new Director of Program Evaluation, Research, and Assessment. We are very good at getting talent from St. Paul Public Schools, because John also comes to us from St. Paul Public Schools. It's been wonderful to work with him over the last month. He brings a really technical skill set, so I'm looking forward to that triangle of teaching, learning, and assessment really working together and moving our student achievement further. So I'm going to let John tell you a little bit about himself, and I'm pleased to introduce John.
Good evening, board, Chair Burnett, Superintendent Jacobus, board members and student reps. I spent the last 7 years in St. Paul Public Schools doing something pretty similar to what I'll be doing here, working in assessment, program evaluation. I usually specialize in areas like post-secondary options. I work on with the SLED's national data set or state data set. Before I went to St. Paul, I worked in Rosemount, Apple Valley, Egan. I spent about 6.5 years there doing something very similar, working much more with assessment, but also doing a lot of program evaluation, looking at different things and making sure we're doing them to the best of our abilities. And before that, I was at the State Department of Education in the Federal Programs Office, working in school accountability, reading, and working with Title I and Title III funding. So that's free students at need and students with limited English proficiency. I'm really excited. I'm bringing on things that we're going to have coming the next year. We're trying to put together a program evaluation calendar. We're also looking at a reporting calendar so we can have, when we come to you, you know what you're going to get, and you get the same thing year after year. So we have some expectations of what I will give you, and I can have some expectations of what you want as consumers of data. So expect a lot of very fun 50, 60 slide PowerPoints, just bar graphs left and right. We'll try and make it more fun than that, but that's probably the next year, year and a half.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Five point oh is public comment. At this time, individuals may speak to the school board on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. The board will not respond to or discuss your comments. Character abuse or specific complaints identifying staff, students, or task force members will not be permitted. The superintendent may be asked to prepare a response to your concerns. Our policy allows 3 minutes per person, and I do not have anyone signed up this evening, but if you'd like to approach, now would be the time. All right, seeing no one, we are moving on to 6.0, which are our consent items. All consent items are considered routine and non-controversial by the school board and will be approved by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items, but prior to the meeting, board members had the opportunity to review each of them and could have requested that one be moved to an action item. So we don't have that this evening, so I will entertain a motion to approve the consent items.
So move. Second.
Moved by Pat, second by Katie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 7.0 are workshop items. That is an agenda on our February 6th meeting. 8.0 are information items. 8.1 is our financial update. And our Director of Finance and Operations, Dan Pine, will join us.
Good evening, Chair Burnett, members of the school board, Superintendent Jacobus, and student members of the school board. I'm here tonight to give our monthly financial update, and then after that, we will have a presentation on the long-range facility planning process. I don't know if you ever heard this story. These two accountants were sitting outside on a break, and actually for one of them it was a smoking break, and he was smoking, and the other guy says to him, "How long have you been smoking?" He says, 30 years. He says, "That's just unbelievable." He goes, "You're spending $1,900 a year smoking. You could invest that at 8%, and by now you'd have $250,000 and you'd have a new Ferrari." And the smoker looked at him and said, "Where's your Ferrari?" As we look at our school finance update, I'd like to always remind everybody of the principles of our school finance. With South Washington County, we follow these rules of integrity, being ethical, being conservative, forecast the worst and expect that to happen, security, safeguard all our assets, and have mission-driven expenditures. We just got done with an audit, and what an audit will do is ensure integrity. It confirms that we present a fair representation of our financial status. It's not so much an indication of whether you're doing well or poorly, or you have this much money or that much money. It's a matter of, is what we're saying actually what it is? So the state of the budgets, this time of year, we're going to hear some state of the state addresses, some state of the nation addresses. It's generally when we talk about the state of the budget. As you know, we just finished our 18-19 audit, and that was completed, and it was presented to the school board at the last school board meeting. As we look at the unassigned fund balance in the general fund, we saw that it came out to about almost $8.8 million, which is 4.36% of expenditures. It was an increase of over $6 million from the prior year. It's an increase of almost 3% of expenditures. Bear in mind, though, that the school board policy is 5 to 9%, which really only reflects 2.5 to 4.5, 5 weeks of expenditures or operations. At some point, as I've indicated before, I would desire at some point if we can get the board to change our parameters and get it up to about 16%, which is still below the state average if you looked at those charts we looked at last time. And that would be about 2 months of operations. And that gives us a little more leeway as we handle different things that come up, not only emergencies, but also as we look at staffing and negotiations and things like that. But right now, as you can see, we're not even at our fund balance policy yet, and it's very, very tight. This is a chart of our history of our general and internal services balance history. And the reason I want to bring into the internal service fund, you may or may not know that the internal service fund was established probably back at least 15 years ago. And the purpose of the internal service fund was to service the severance obligations of the district, and would also service health obligations of the health insurance obligations of the district. That's known as OPEB, or other post-employment benefits. So the board and administration had put money away each year in the internal service fund so that when it came time to paying the severance payments and those other health insurance benefits that were negotiated into contracts, that we could use the internal service fund to pay those obligations and not the general fund. Either way, those obligations are there, so if there's no internal service money in there, then we'll use our general fund. So for the sake of looking at our fund balances, I combine the two because they're both used for the same thing. So you can see back in 10, we had almost $25 million, and then as we kept deficit spending, sometimes on purpose, and we looked at reductions, and we had to make decisions on what to keep and what not to keep. And we always knew that we probably needed more money in our operating referendum. The board had made decisions in 14-15 to ask for $525 per pupil more, and then 2 years later to ask for $375 per pupil more. And you can see that as we planned that we got down to a certain point, and now you can see that it's going back up again. And that's mainly because we've now secured the full $900 per pupil in an operating referendum. We'll talk a little bit about that later on in the slides. We also have moved some of the internal service funds into what's called an OPEB trust, and that means that it can only be used for a certain thing, and that money is put into the trust to pay health insurance obligations that were negotiated into contracts. We still use the internal service fund to pay our severance payments, so we got to kind of keep an eye on what that balance is looking like and how much is there, because once that's gone, then we'll start having to use general fund. We'll have to put it in the budget. And we spend about $1 million a year on severance payments that are all been negotiated in contracts. So what do we know so far this year, the 2019-2020 budget, what we know now? Well, we know that we budgeted our expenditures to be higher than revenues. We budgeted a $1.147 million deficit. We had also budgeted enrollment to actually decrease by 7, but so far it's increased compared to budget, and that increase has held on. We'll talk about enrollment in just a little bit. And we know not all our contracts are settled, and that will make a difference as we look at revising our budgets. And then We know that we added already to handle the influx of students, more than 20 teaching FTEs. And they were added to handle caseloads in special education and increases in elementary class sizes. This is just a chart for you to look at so you can kind of see where the numbers come from as we do what's called enrollment projections. And I look at these every month and adjust them so I can kind of have a good idea where we'll end up each year with enrollment, because as you know, probably the biggest factor in our revenue was the number of students we had. Because the largest part of our revenue is derived by multiplying the number of students you have by the basic formula that the state legislature has established. Based on what I've seen so far this year, and my enrollment projections for budgets are always more conservative than you might see from a demographer, just mainly because I don't want to overshoot it. But right now I'm projecting that we'll have 18,754 students at the end of this year. And if you look at the little square box in the bottom, we had projected to have 18,537 in our budget. So that those extra ADMs is about $2.1 million in revenue. This is just a chart to show the gradual increase in enrollment. And it has gone up over the years. Like, can I go backwards? Yeah. If you look back 10 years ago, we had 17,400 students. And 10 years later, we have 18,754, so almost 1,300 students have increased. We usually increase about 1% a year. We're probably looking at a bigger, faster growth in the next 4 to 5 years based on all the housing that's going up. So as we look at our enrollment, I'll get you at how I end up projecting. I take the count that we know of on January 1st. I get a new count every month from Student Information Systems. And I look at all the kids that they're K through 12. I don't count all the pre-Ks. I count some of those for various reasons. I'll tell you why. So it's 18,676. Then we get to add some more dollar-producing ADMs because we get paid for early childhood and special education students in our general fund. We get paid for those kids in our voluntary pre-K program, which is another funding source of the state, and also in the School Readiness Plus program. That's about 328 ADMs for students. I take off 200 for PSEO students because we do not get paid for students that are in post-secondary enrollment options. The colleges that they go to get paid for that time those kids are there. They show up in our accounts, but I have to take some off of there because we won't get paid for those students. And then I project some more drops because eventually you're always going to go down through the end of the year, about 50 more kids. So I come up with 18,754 against a budget of 18,537. So as we look at that, then we have to look and say, where are you going to be, Dan, at the end of the year? Well, we knew that our unassigned fund balance at the end of last year was at $8.7 million. We knew that we'd budgeted a deficit, so if we hit budget exactly, we're going to use up $1.1 million. But I'll add some more revenue in for the extra students we're looking at, 217 students, times about $10,000 per student. The amount you get per student is a combination of the basic formula plus operating referendum dollars per student. We added many special ed teachers. With that, we get more aid for that, about $800,000. Then take off the expenses that we added for the FTEs and teachers and some other expenses, and ended up at about 4%, about $8.4 million in our fund balance. So not a big jump and not a big drop. Pretty steady. I think, once we've established our funding for what we had this year, I don't think we're going to see as big an increase next year unless we get a really big influx of kids that would change our class sizes in the general classrooms. So looking at next year, what am I looking at as we do the budget? Enrollment should increase about 200 students again. We're going to assume that the state will hand out a 2% formula increase. Never real quite sure what's going to happen with the federal revenue. That's been going down every year. There'll be some staffing model changes as some of the schedules are changing at some of the secondary schools, the middle schools. I usually have to count on about $3.5 million worth of increases from inflation, from cost of living adjustments, and from staffing. At this point, I'm projecting our fund balance will be about 5% at the end of '21. What can change these projections? Well, your beginning fund balance would change it, and then we would get a new fund balance into this year. Staffing, of course, enrollment, contract settlements, services, utility, and supply costs. You know, as I tell you every year that it's not a good time for me when I see snow flying, because I know it costs us $50,000 to $60,000 every time we plow. If a perfect winter for me would be no snow, of course. Legislative actions, 1% on the formula is about $1.3 million for us. Unfunded mandates, new rules in special education, changes in pension costs, things like that, and then other revenue sources. So I just want to talk a little bit about some future financial implications. As I told you, the Internal Service Fund is decreasing. It funds our severance payments. Now, we moved the other obligation of other post-employment benefits into the trust, and we believe the trust is in a good spot. It's got about $4 million. It earns enough interest to take care of its obligations. But the Internal Service Fund is decreasing. We spend about $1 million a year on severances. And the general fund will have to cover those costs if the Internal Service Fund goes empty. That would mean that as we look in the future, we want to start planning that as we look at our future budgets, that we can start putting some money back in there. And then we have about a $12 million operating levy that expires in 2023. Probably the first time I'll say this publicly, but I'm a big advocate of this. I would hope we would consider combining all our operating levies into one, and I would suggest to do it in 2022, because 2023, the money runs out in 2024 on one of our operating levies. You always want to go out maybe a year ahead of the expiration in case it doesn't pass, and you can do another plan. You want to go out ahead before it expires. If we actually took all our levies, and I think the next slide has all the levies on it, you can see the final years of them, and you can see the last chance renewal, I call it. I mean, that would be the last time you go to an election and still get the money without a break. And I would always suggest to go a year ahead of those last chances. But hopefully we consider over the years that if we combined them all into one, we'll get the same amount of money, but then you won't have to have an election for another, whatever you choose, 6 to 10 years. And then if it doesn't work in 2022, then we have time to come up with another plan. But really what's going to happen is that you would do what's called a revoke and renew, where you revoke all the levies and renew one big one, and there'd be no change in the people's taxes. Actually, the tax impact would probably go down because the property values go up. It's something I hope we consider, and we'll keep bringing it up. And I think it would really help out operations and really take some strain off of some of these elections. With that, I'll entertain any questions. I don't know if I'm on time, about 4 minutes left.
So Dan, can you clarify, if you do the revoke and renew, what happens if the community says no to the revoke and renew, they're not revoked? They're just...
Exactly. Yeah, then they'll just stay as they are, yes.
Okay. And then if they... Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, the first one that's going to expire, we got to kind of watch the date, because if we wait too long, that one might go away. We wouldn't have the money at all. Because we have 3 of them lined up, 4 of them lined up, and then I guess I made it more confusing. Sorry. But yes, that's why I always say that, because you're asking them to revoke and renew. They say no. Well, then we just go back to where we were.
Okay.
And it saves the cost of the election. If we're the only item on the ballot, it's about $50,000 to do an election, and then all of the meetings that we do, 100 meetings, we spend a lot of time. And if you remember with the legislative update, renewals have passed almost 100% of the time in the last 10 years. So it would be a matter of helping our public understand what revoke and renew mean and putting them together. And then we wouldn't be out on a campaign trail every 2 years for a 6-year period.
Okay.
So it would help the voters too, I think, just.
But wouldn't the elections happen anyway, right? Because there's school board elections and that happen at the
If that
same
is,
time?
yeah. Usually there is something. We're not the only thing on the ballot.
Oh,
But
okay.
we still have costs even if we're not the only thing because we have to work with the county, but
Okay.
And
yeah,
some of those
it's not
costs
as
have
high.
to do with mailing required
Yeah,
notices and
yep,
things like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I had another question. So when you revoke and renew, right, and say you do this in 2022, right, and it passes and everyone in the community, so then all of these would then, so then the ones that expire in 2027 would then end 5 years later? They would all end in 2023, 2030
2032, we could say, yeah.
instead of 2037.
Right.
So we would lose 5 years on some of these later ones.
Well, at this point, they expire in 2027. So you'd have to renew to get to
Oh, sorry,
2037.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll keep bringing it up. We got plenty of time to decide.
Any other questions? All right, sorry.
I would just say that the discussion on internal service fund will be an important one. For years, the board was able to put money into that account, and we had a significant significant amount to know that we could service all of our needs if they all came due. Now, they don't, and there's some accounting things that are on paper and some real cost each year. But we are at the point, as Dan said, as we spend $1 million a year, we're going to have to now put money into that account. That affects our overall fund balance and what we do when we build the budget and what we do when we talk about all of the elements that impact the budget. So.
And this is our summer to reevaluate what we need to be fully funded. Is that right?
To get the actuarial done,
Yeah.
I think it
So
is.
it's
don't-
an
I don't
odd,
remember
starts
it
with an
last.
odd year, so
Oh, so not till
it
next
would be
year.
21.
Okay.
Okay, I don't remember that. Okay, great. All right, so 8.2, long-range facilities update.
Could go sit down and come back. As we work on our long-range facility planning, we want to give the board updates as much as possible. I think this process so far has been very transparent, and we're proud of that because we're not afraid to have people say, well, that's a dumb idea. So we've been running a lot of ideas out there and getting input and throwing other things out there. But it's been a really good process. And I'm here tonight to let you know where we're at on our long-range facility planning. So we've always got to start and ask, why are we doing this? Well, over the next 10 years, we know the district projects more than 3,500 potential new K through 12 students. That's mainly due to housing growth and turnover of houses. Most of the growth is expected to occur at the secondary level, which makes it a little more urgent at some points. And this projected new growth is in addition to the fact that we've grown 11% since 2009. So as I said before, we're growing at 1% a year the way it goes, and that's running into 180 to 200 more kids. And then we're gonna put 3,500 more students on there, and that's basically based on the number of housing starts we had and the tremendous capture rate that we see in Woodbury, a capture rate on houses. It used to be in the old days, I'd drive around and look at a house. A new house would produce, on average, 0.25 to 0.3 kids. So you had to count 3 houses to get 1 student. It's kind of bad when the business manager, just looks at houses as students, but Woodbury runs about 0.75 to 8, meaning that for every house, they're producing 1/4 to 0.8% of an ADM, meaning that it's almost 3 times the national average. We're not quite sure why, but we know that's what's happening. And these are mainly single-family detached houses that do that. Even our apartments produce higher than the state average. So what were we at for the long-range facility planning? Well, I've told you this story many times, but I'll tell you again. In 2015, we had 2 bonding questions on the ballot. We also had an operating referendum question. Well, that was question 1 was for an operating referendum, which the voters were very supportive. And number 2 question was to build a new middle school and to make improvements at the other middle schools. That one passed. And the 3rd question was to expand the 3 high schools and to improve the elementary schools that needed it, and mainly get more bathrooms in some of them because they don't have enough restrooms in a lot of those elementary schools. The plan on the high schools, just as you can reference this to what we're going to talk about, was to get every high school up to a 2,300 capacity. So we were going to add 500 seats to East Ridge, we were going to add 300 seats to Woodbury High School, and we were going to add 200 seats to Park High School. Regardless, it doesn't really matter because it didn't pass. But the need has not gone away, and it's even gotten worse, as you'll see in the numbers. And we know the elementary schools still need upgrading, kids still need to go to the bathroom. That didn't go away. And suddenly our cities are meeting and exceeding their home permits. City of Woodbury has a rule that they would only have 600 building permits a year. But in their plan, they can catch up. If they don't get to 600, they can carry those over. So they've carried over, so they've been doing over 600 for the last couple of years. The growth is still the same as if they looked over a 5-year period, but suddenly we're seeing a huge increase in in home permits. We have overcrowding at all levels of school at some of our schools. I talked about the retention rate of our resident students. So what we did was we formed a long-range facility planning steering committee and a long-range facility planning task force. And then we did a demographic study. And then we've been reviewing elementary, secondary, and district options on a weekly basis, basically. The demographic study shows these numbers, and I think I've run these numbers before you before, but the secondary schools are going to really get pinched. In 5 years, East Ridge will be 500 over capacity, in 10 years, almost 1,000 over capacity. Woodbury High School in 5 years will be about 300 over capacity, then 700 in 10 years. Park High School should be okay in 5 years, but even after that, there'll be a couple hundred over. Goldman Middle School is gonna go over quicker than we thought. The other middle schools should be able to hold off, except for Woodbury Middle School looks like it's gonna get a huge increase in 10 years. The other ones seem to be okay. And then we have our 16 elementary schools. So as we look at those, we kind of just narrowed them down to, I want to group them off to you so you can see that we have some that are projected to be over capacity. Bailey Elementary is going to run over capacity in 5 and 10 years. Pine Hill, Gray Cloud Elementary, Red Rock Elementary, Royal Oaks, and Woodbury Elementary. The bottom 2 aren't as drastic as the other ones, but the real hot spots we're really worried about are Bailey, Pine Hill, and Red Rock, but Gray Cloud is up there too. The rest of our elementary schools are pretty much within capacity and should be okay as far as that goes. They do need improvements though. All the 60s elementaries, we call them, all need more restrooms, except for Armstrong is okay, but the other 5 need more restrooms. We need to build some more collaborative learning spaces. And just in general, we need to add some more gym space, things like that. So district-wide, as we talked earlier, capacity right now is about 2,100. And in 10 years, it's going to go up and down to about 2,300, 2,400. So as we looked at our plan, we look at it 10 years out. And as we look at the elementary schools, projected peak enrollment of all elementary schools should stay under capacity, but the problem is we have hot spots and we have places that are going to be overcrowded that are much too far away from the schools that are not overcrowded. We have enough seats district-wide, But the southern district schools are running below capacity, but the northern school districts are expected to exceed capacity. So we really have to look at where we need to make capacity changes and how the schools are being utilized. And then we also know that if we can't pull it off, if it doesn't pass, then we have to look at, the plan B is always going to be to change attendance boundaries. Right now, Bailey, Gray Cloud, Pine Hill, and Red Rock are most dire need for additional space. And I talked earlier about the bathroom space. Talking a lot about bathrooms today, aren't I? As we looked at the enrollment projections, we want to just look back and say, well, what happened when we were looking in 2013 and 2015. As you know, you could tell even from the question in 2015 when we said we needed to expand the high schools, that we're right on, that need didn't go away, it's getting worse. And if you look at this, you can see in the demographer in 2013 is the solid red line, and the demographer in 2015, the one just done, is the blue line, and you can see that it's pretty darn close. I mean, they're off a little bit on the way there, but they end up in the same spot, and even if we projected out what the red line was going to do, it's going to pretty much hit right on what the blue line's doing. So everybody knew what they were doing, we just didn't have enough votes to get the high schools increased. So what is our planning process? How does it look? We have a design team. It's composed of some of the members of the steering committee. It employs some local contractors, well, a local architect, a local engineer. They work on a fee basis, so there's no partiality when we come to later when we bid for jobs and things like that. They've been working in this district for a while, so they know the ins and outs. But the design team takes the original concepts, sends them out to the steering committee, who sends them out to the task force. They come back to the steering committee. We tell the design team to try something else. But they do a lot of great work on figuring how much things are going to cost, what could be done with certain sites. It's quite fascinating. The leadership team is really composed of about 4 or 5 of us, and we're there to oversee the whole process, to make sure we're ready for meetings, establish timelines, things like that. The steering committee is made up of district administrators who will make a recommendation to the superintendent. So the steering committee takes a lot of input from the task force, and we'll also start taking input from focus groups as we get down the line. And really they come back and they'll probably make the final recommendation to the superintendent. The task force is the one in which we have not only school administrators on there, but we also have members of the public. And we have a pretty good cross-section. It was on a volunteer basis. And what they'll do is they'll take the designs that we're looking at, and then Julie Nielsen will facilitate the meetings, and they'll have little focus groups and come up with different ideas and pare down ideas. And you can kind of see how it works when we look at some of the proposals. I'm sorry. Then we have advisory groups, and those are going to be the ones that we're going to work on with some focus groups. For instance, CFAC, which is my financial advisory group, they've been looking at the plans, and they'll come together with other advisory groups on February 24th and start analyzing or look at the plans too and give us feedback. So some of the nitty gritty. I think you've seen this before, probably not the new members, but these were the original ideas on the secondary. There was a renovations and additions 10-year. There was a renovations addition 5-year. There was a new 4th high school. There was a plan that included just a 9th grade center. All the 9th graders go to one school. There was a plan that had just a building at Eastridge that was just 9 and 10, a new building, and then the 11 and 12 would go in the old building. And there's hybrid options. And after looking at these and running these by the steering committee and the task force, the design team had gotten it down to just a couple options right now. First of all, on the middle school, it applies to both the options, And it's pretty simple because they had a lot of improvements that were made from the 2015 referendum. We basically just need to increase the capacity at Oldman Middle School. We want to add 300 seats there. We always planned on doing that. It's set up for that to do fairly easily. The reason we didn't put that many seats in the first place because we ran into budget constrictions back in 2015. Otherwise, there'll be a few improvements with secured entrances and things like that. On the high school side of it, right now we're down to option 1, which is renovations and additions for equity. So we still, the bottom line is basically we have 3 high schools. We would still have 3 high schools. We would increase the capacity of all 3 high schools to about 2,500. Now that's a philosophical thing that we've been talking about, is that what size does the community want for our high schools? But to prevent building a new high school, we would have to increase the capacity of these 3 high schools. And there's other improvements that we're going to do, and obviously we're going to make things better. I didn't put them all on here because it's a very busy slide, and we'll talk about that in more detail down the road. But it includes things like adding special education rooms, moving cafeterias and enlarging them, and other collaborative workspaces and things like that. This option 1, if you take the middle school requirements and the high schools, it costs about $223 million. Now option 2 would be basically to leave your, and I hope I'm not simplifying this too much, but to leave your 3 high schools at their current capacities, and then to add a new 4th high school with a capacity of about 1,800. So that's going to produce the same effect as the previous one as far as equity goes, but it's going to lower the size of each high school. This one, since it's a new high school is involved, we'll make improvements to the other ones too. But the fact that we have a new high school in there and a new school is pretty expensive at this point to build. I think we're looking at, the estimate right now is about $212 million for a new high school. We built East Ridge for about $195 to $100 million. And that was 10 years ago, but still. Construction is very expensive right now. So this total package is about $350 million. These plans are all going to be vetted out amongst all the focus groups and different task force. So when we looked at elementary, we had, these options were on the table. We had an RNA, renovations and additions, which really would increase the size of growth where it's occurring. So basically just really hitting up Bailey, Pine Hill, Red Rock, Gray Cloud. Then we had a proposal to do RNA, but then moving 3 elementaries into a 2 model, and not knowing which schools, but working the numbers so that we repurpose one of the schools. We also had an option that looked at building a new Pine Hill. Reason being is because to add on to Pine Hill, and if you drive down there and see all the development, it's fantastic, but it's going to really crowd that school. It's a tough school to add on to. I mean, we can do it, but we may be better served to build a new one in the vicinity, in the close vicinity of that area. And then we can always repurpose Pine Hill, use it for the alternative high school. Another option was 2 new elementary schools, the Pine Hill one and then a brand new one. And then building 4 new elementary schools. As you can see, that's probably as expensive when you build new. So what we've done from these options, though, is got them down to 3 options. So the first option right now in elementary that we're looking at is to increase the capacities at Cottage Grove L, Red Rock, Bailey, Gray Cloud, and Pine Hill, do the bathrooms and remodels. We had to add in the administrative portions of the plan into the elementary side, mainly because it works out well as we interchange buildings. So we really need a new transportation center. The one we have is too small. And if we're going to have that many more kids, if we have 3,000 more kids, how many more buses are we going to need? Well, you don't even fit 100 on a bus. You're going to need about 35 more buses. There's no place to park that many buses down there. And then we remodeled this building and the district program centers, repurposed some schools, and moved the alternative high school. With the options, some improvement options, that's about $186 million. So option 2 that was winnowed down to is having 2 new elementary schools. You can see the capacity that it improves it by. We would have a new Pine Hill Elementary School. We would have a new Central Elementary. That's not the name of it, but it's called that because it's centrally located in the district. And the idea of that would be that it would pull the kids that were going to be straining the Red Rocks and the Baileys and the Gray Cloud and pull them into there. Do the bathrooms and remodels that need it, the transportation center, remodel district service center to handle all the DSC people to repurpose some schools. All high school goes to the old Pine Hill site and sell the district program center. It's a very desirable lot for development, but you really aren't going to get a whole lot of money out of it either. Well, the reason one thing we look at when we look at some of this is deferring long-term facility maintenance costs, because the longer you hold on to some of the buildings, the roofs and the parking lots and stuff all need to be upgraded. And once you put another $5 million into it, it's really hard to let go of it. So those are the things we always consider too as the offset to long-term facility maintenance. That package is about $213 million. And number 3 is 1 new elementary school. So we would do additions to Bailey and Pine Hill. We would do that new centrally located elementary school. And we would do the other things as we talked to, and then Old High School would go to a new site. And that's about $168 million. So this is kind of the higher level look at these plans. There's a lot of moving parts in them. I really want to give you an idea of what the kind of things we're looking at, what some of the people will be dissecting over the next month or so. So as we like to talk about our timelines. So in December, the elementary draft concepts were shared with the task force. And when I talk about the concepts, you saw that one slide where I said, oh, we're looking at these 5, 6 things. And since then already, we've winnowed it down to those 3 options we're looking at right now. In February, we're going to be looking at, we already had our January meeting for the task force, and that's how they narrowed it down. In February, we're going to gather input from our advisory groups. I don't have the schedule memorized, but I know my group is meeting. We're going to have them all, various groups meet together on February 24th and 25th here. And they'll get the presentation, and then we'll do work groups. So my CFAC member hopefully can be here on the 24th. But that's when my group comes. But we'll send out an invite pretty quick to everybody. We feel that as we gather input from my advisory groups, that we'll have touched and received some kind of feedback from over 200 people. Is that what we were saying, Julie? 200? 300? March of 2020, that's the exciting time because I get to look at financing options. I mean, I've already talked to our financial advisors and found out, what this kind of stuff would cost. But, that's going to change on a daily basis. The higher your property values are, your total tax base, the less impact on each individual homeowner. So those are all things that we'll be looking at how to finance. Maybe some would, if we think the bond is going to be too big, maybe we'll want to put some of it into long-term facility maintenance or something like that. In April, we'll send out for the board's main benefit is we'll try to get some surveys out to find what the pulse of the community is, how they feel about building, how they feel about, what the financial appetite of the community is. In May, we'll be finalizing those options. We've gathered all this input, and we should really have our plans ready to go. June and July, we'll have community meetings to even get more people out there to see it and to gather more feedback. And then per regulations, we're basically looking at we have to do what's called a review and comment. Submit that to Minnesota Department of Education to do any kind of building project which requires bonding. And they want at least 90 days to review it, then they tell you whether you can do it or not. So we need the board to approve it in August so that we have enough time for them to review it so that you can approve a ballot question sometime in November. We would begin a campaign, and then our hope would be if this all looks good, that we would have some kind of bond election, special election in February of 2021. That was a lot. So, do you have any questions or? So I kind of want to keep you updated. Things change sometimes on a daily basis, but this is really where we're at right now. Yes.
You mentioned collaborative space a couple of times throughout there, and the spaces I've seen are beautiful, no doubt. If our goal is to increase capacity, how does a collaborative space increase the capacity of a school?
Well, the plan was, and the architects look at some of the buildings, it's a little tougher to do in some of the older buildings, but there would be, in addition to, so it'd be like an added benefit. So the capacity side for the ones that need capacity increases is going to be pretty much straight up classrooms. But within that, they would also want to work on whether it would be a new gymnasium or something like that that could be used for multi-purpose things, or just a place for them to go. Julie could probably describe it better, but go ahead if you want to.
Yeah, the collaborative spaces, so one of the first goals of the Long Range Facility Task Force was to make sure we had enough seats for students, but it was also to take a look at the delivery of curriculum and how students can interact and engage. So, the collaborative space, you're right, Louise, it doesn't get at, a seat for a student because it's a space, but in some of the plans, it would be to push out a gym or a cafeteria space so that in our old prototype schools there was more of a commons entering, so a space where students could practice a performance. The cost to take a classroom and take a wall down and make a collaborative space similar to what we did at Nuevas Fronteras is very expensive in our old prototype schools. And so at our next meeting, we are actually going to go to Pine Hill because a number of the members on the task force have not been in our older prototype schools. And so they're unfamiliar how hauly, if you will, they are. And that literally when the kids are in small groups, they're out in the hallways.
Yes.
So if the election is in February 2021, and what would be the timeline for opening a new building or for concluding the renovations, depending on whatever choice?
Yeah, what the people on the design team and the construction people have, a phrase called phasing. So even before if we decide on a plan and haven't got to the vote yet, but we're doing the campaign, we'll work on the phasing plan right away so people would have an idea. Because if we're going to do something, if we're going to renovate this building or the DPC or work on transportation, we can do that during the school year. We got to save all that precious summertime for the schools. If we were going to build a new high school, I can't push anyone any faster. They're telling me they need 3 years. Now, in elementary school, probably not that long. I would hope they could do it in 18 months.
So 3 years, so February 2021 is the election, so 3 years from then would be then the fall of 2024, correct?
And
the high schools would be over capacity at that time already?
The fall of 23, but I don't know, might be unrealistic too.
But the high schools would already be over capacity, the existing high schools would already be over capacity before there was space for the new high schools, correct?
They could be. I mean, it really depends on if the kids all come, as the demographer says, and then also the mix of what we have for online learning and PSEO and things like that. But yes, there's an issue with the overcrowding.
And we would probably be looking at utilizing every space at Eastridge. All of our common areas and the pods would become classrooms. We're already looking at that now, making sure that every space is used every single hour of the day. We might need to look at expanding and stretching our schedule a little bit. We've had some 0 hours, might have some 7th hour classes and see if we can spread students out. And again, as Dan said, it depends on how fast the students actually move in. We know the overall numbers are coming up in that direction, but they may not come in as quickly as the high school, even though that's where the growth is. But it, no doubt, because we were looking at this in 2015, we're going to have to make some decisions because we're going to be really packed and trying to make sure that we still have spaces where kids have, students have a good learning environment.
And to your point, if we just do the expansion, we can get that done a little quicker.
Okay.
Because we can actually work on that during school, because they'd be off. It may be like adding a wing to it. So we
Okay.
can still go to school and work on it. It's just if we have to do internal things. But yeah, building a new school, they don't want to, they want a long time. I'd like to have them get done in 2.5 years, but they're kind of saying 3 years.
I think one thing that's important for the board is that if you look at the elementary enrollment and you go back there are enough elementary seats throughout the district. It's the location of those seats. And so that was a conversation that the task force had as well, is now we're going to invest more in busing kids from the the northern end of the district to the southern. I will say that the task force overwhelmingly was supportive of the 3-into-2 model. Matter of fact, in almost every option that we put out there, and the 3-into-2 option again was taking 3 of our small elementary schools and combining to be 2 elementary schools, and then looking at that, the one elementary school as either a repurpose or doing something else with. And so that was overwhelming from the task force, that they really believe that those small elementary schools are so significantly under capacity that the 3-into-2 was the best option. And then lastly, just to point out, I saw some of the eyebrows go up as you looked at the dollar amounts. Keep in mind that we worked on the secondary package and then the elementary plus district option, so we would be combining total packages between secondary plus elementary plus district, which we know we're looking at that dollar amount and it's really quite large.
Yes.
So I have a question. So how, looking at location-wise, and there are certain areas in the district that are booming and are going to continue to boom more than other areas. So how do we continue to have the schools be filled at more even rates as we go along when there's different areas that are going to be booming more, especially when we're looking at more?
Well, one of the solutions is, like I said, to build a new elementary school in that central area, which could draw kids. It would siphon kids off of Gray Cloud, Red Rock, and Bailey, because that's really our hot spot. And the boundary for Red Rock and Bailey run down below East Ridge, and then the Gray Cloud one runs up to Military. In the meantime, the only way to really take care of that is to do boundary changes, but we generally do our boundary changes for a plan on a 10-year period, and we haven't any discussions about changing boundaries on the go like that. We'll have to take a look, but we haven't seen really an immediate need to do that. But that's the only really way to keep up. But that's going to cost you more in transportation and things like that too.
And for elementary, we don't like to build multi-level schools, correct? Or we choose not to, or is there a specific reason behind this?
I don't have any preference. I don't know if it's.
I think it would be great to have the multi-level, because that helps on the footprint. Our old buildings, because of the foundation, we don't have that ability to build up. I mean, there's ways to put footers and come with beams, but I think it's very expensive. But that is an option that could be explored again to try to utilize that same footprint. But in the future, I think it is important to look at the second story. We're still in the middle, too, of deciding we want to make sure we don't overbuild, which is such a difficult discussion when we look at the way, even at the secondary level with online classes, you can't predict how many students might want to take a class like that at any one time. I am confident, because we're social beings, we're not going to get to the point where kids won't come to school. Social gatherings are really important for us as humans, and so we will have that type of structure, but it's, as Louise, you mentioned too, the type of spaces and how we can utilize them, and can we look at things creatively. The group has done a phenomenal job. That's one of the things I want to compliment on and talk a little bit about in my report, but it is a bit of a, what we know now, will that look the same in 20 years? Now, we're building for that 20 to 50 year, but this is a 10-year plan. The other thing that's so critical for our public to understand is it's great to have this issue because people want to move into our community. I think we have a lot to do with that. Our cities plan well, but it isn't something that we are coming forward because we want to have new things in the district. We would all love to be stable and not have to be looking at a bond election, but we're reacting to the new housing that's coming up. And so we're really working with our cities because we'll need some support around this as we go forward, particularly as Dan said with transportation. We need both cities to look at where can we have a bus terminal, a new one, and satellite sites would work wonderful if we had some space in the northern area of the district because buses drive all the way from here back and forth. And the same thing with expanding here, but we are landlocked where we have no more room for buses. And so we have some options of looking at some different land, but it would be nice to have satellite sites as well. So that along with just having all of our city folks helping us as we start to communicate what this might look like. Because as you look at those dollar amounts, it's a complicated plan and it's going to take some time. So I think, again, the timeline is laid out to go slower, even though we'd like to be on the ballot faster, but to give the input, as Julie said, with hundreds of people, and then continue that all the way through as we get to an election. So.
Do you know when the cities will be at their functional capacity?
You know, their build-out, I don't know. The last time that we had numbers, I think there were 12,000 homes planned between the two cities, but I don't know how much empty space is left after that. That might be a good question the next time we meet on what is their 100-year plan. When we did the 100-year plan in 2013, it showed, at that time, the demographer thought we would max out at about 28,000 students from what they could see on potential building, but I have no idea if that fits with the city's ultimate plans.
And our planning engineer who does a lot of the design work, he's reviewed the 2040 plans. I'd have to ask him the details on how far out they're going. And it's really, you know where they're building now, so it's really, are they going to go farther east past 19?
A lot more discussion to have happen.
Yep.
All right, thank you very much for the update. All right, so we have had something come up, and so we're going to have to, just for an explanation, Pat's husband is on the consent agenda, so technically she needs to abstain. So what we will need to do is we're going to reconsider our motion to approve the consent agenda, and then approve it one more time. So I will accept a motion to reconsider the approval of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Sorry, I saw you going to the microphone, but Sharon said it first? Okay. So Sharon motioned and Katie seconded. So if you're voting aye, obviously we're going to reconsider that motion to approve. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. So now we will need a new motion to accept the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Sharon and second by Elise. And then, so when we do the approval, the ayes, and go through the nays, and then we will have Pat state that she's abstaining because of the conflict of interest. So all those in favor say aye of approving the consent agenda.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so we are back on track. 9.0 are discussion items, and we don't have any this evening. 10.0 are action items. 10.1 is the approval of the revision to our 2020-21 calendar. Dr. Jacobus.
Thanks. As you know, last meeting I presented the alterations that we looked at after we got into the calendar and some of the changes that came forward around time off, where we put some things together and we thought would be better for kids with a day for 6th graders to come in like the high school kids do for a day of orientation at the first day of class rather than in the summer that we've done with Camp 6. And then after that meeting, as we looked and folks took another look at that, what we realized with the changes we've made with changing the calendar to put it work days and different things, we missed, and we had 2 extra days for teachers based on the teacher calendar over what we should have had in the calendar. We had the same number of days for kids, so we looked at how do we readjust. So what we did with this calendar is we looked at the professional development day on February 12th, which was a Friday. We moved that to Monday, the 8th. And then we took a day off for kids and students on February 9th. That gives us a chance then to have that bond election, that potential bond election. If we do any of these plans, we have to be on the ballot, to have that as an election day, and then we don't have that issue, and it fits with this calendar. And then we ended the school year 1 day earlier. As we changed it, the kids' days stay the same, but then teachers have one less. It fits the contract. And so rather than end on a Monday, which was a concern for folks, we end on a Friday. So it works better. And because we've been unfortunately coming back with this calendar, we wanted to bring it forward again for approval tonight versus waiting 2 weeks so parents could take a look. We hope that those 2 changes, a 1 day earlier, wouldn't affect travel plans because it would just help them if they were out, and that day off in February, they'd have time to take a look at it, those 2 changes there. That week already was broken up, so we'd ask for approval, and I want to hope that I don't have to bring this calendar back again, because we had multiple people again take a look at it, and I want to thank Marty Virgin, who took a look and saw this first and called and said, hey, wait, there's some things we got to look at, and so that was awesome, and so we'd ask for approval.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the revisions to the 2020-21 calendar.
So move. Second.
Moved by Pat and second by Sharon. Any questions, comments? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. 10.2 is the approval of our 2021-22 calendar.
Well, since we took that calendar that we liked, we just rolled it forward. Well, with the change in dates, we ended up with 3 extra days in this one that were out of sync with our contract. So what we looked at is the school year will begin 1 day earlier, or 1 day later, I'm sorry, for students. The second change, we have 1 additional day off during winter break. It's already a broken up winter break. It's like a week and 3 days or so. And then the first school, so this year would end again 1 day early. So then, again, the student contact days would be the same, and that would fall in the parameters for our contract. And it would just really then roll forward the changes you made in next year's calendar to the following year. And since we've made a number of good changes, we hope that these calendars would then roll year after year until I try to bring something else to have an extended school year. Yeah, year round, 4-day week. So,
all right.
So I'd ask for approval.
All right. So I'll entertain a motion to approve our 21-22 calendar.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Katie and second by Melinda. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. 11.0 are the reports and comments. 11.1 is our superintendent's report.
Okay. Just on a personal note, today I got a text from my wife that now that she was getting theater tickets and I'm a senior citizen, so I get a discount. So that is one benefit. So I want to talk to you a little bit about our district foundation first. In 1995, South Washington County Schools partnered with community members to create an educational foundation with the mission of enriching and expanding programs that benefit our students. The foundation raised funds to supplement learning for a number of years. But with time and changing leadership and a shift in goals, the foundation struggled to maintain a cohesive and sustainable focus. But today I'm proud to share that we are beginning a new chapter with the successful efforts of SoWashco Cares. We now have a new group of community members taking on the task of creating a foundation to expand opportunities and meet student needs. Throughout the visioning process, the group has identified several focused areas. They will continue with the successful SoWashco Cares work of meeting students' basic needs, but their focus will expand to provide resources for mental health and expand enrichment opportunities and fund innovations in the classroom. One of the things we want to look at for our kids that are struggling, it's not just academics. They really need that enrichment that other students in the summer, if they're traveling throughout the world and things like that, a number of our kids don't have that opportunity. And the research is showing around the country that that's one of the main areas that kids, when you look at your opportunity gaps, and where kids are struggling, they don't have the same enrichment. So it's a great focus for the foundation. Our brand new South Washington County Schools Foundation will kick off their first fundraising event aimed at supporting our students and community. It will be held from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m. on February 29th at the Presswick Golf Club in Woodbury. The way the meeting will look, it's a cocktail attire event, and the cost is $50 per ticket, and will include heavy hors d'oeuvres. No, come on, help me there.
Hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah. Hors d'oeuvres, yeah. Appetizer's good. Plant-based menu, I just want you to know. Yep. And a silent auction, games, and activities throughout the evening. Tickets are available for purchase through Cheryl Jogger and SoWashco Cares, or you can call Community Education for more information. So we're really excited. A district our size, we had a really great foundation, and then again, for a variety of reasons, we were unable to really keep things going, and I'm really excited to have this reconstituted and refocused. There's been a lot of work that's gone on for really 5 years. Bob Lawrence and Cheryl Jogger have worked to take a look at what would work best, and we have a great group of people. I was able to attend their last meeting, so we'll move forward. And then second, this evening you heard from Dan and Julie regarding the long-range facilities planning process, including the several options that for moving forward. I want to publicly thank Dan, Julie, Kwame Aim, our facilities director, Dan Hines, our planning assistant director in facilities, and the work they've done to collaborate with our community through the Long Range Facilities Task Force and to develop a comprehensive process that I believe will provide you as a board the best possible options for us to address the student growth over the 10 years. I've heard from task force committee members how much they appreciate the process, the content that they're given at each meeting, and the organization of the meetings. We have some challenging decisions to make, but I cannot be prouder of the work our steering committee has done to implement a process for our community feedback and to finalize the recommended plan. We're fortunate to have so many high-quality leaders working to help us plan for the future. And so as I said, it's going to be a very complicated, or complex and complicated, I would say, but also an emotional journey as we try to help our community vision with us, but look forward at things that are going to be a significant cost. Fortunately, as Dan said, working with our financial planners, the growth really helps to spread out that tax burden on each home. Already we're looking at the same number of dollars that we were asking for when we asked for the bond with Altman. We'll be able to raise that for a lesser cost per homeowner. But that still is not going to make this an easy concept as we start to look at the campaign trail. But the work, as Dan said, it's very transparent. We're going to look for everybody we can to really spend time with and go into depth on the plans. And so by the time we come forward with asking you for the recommendation or the approval of the plans in August, we'll have vetted it probably at a level that, well, definitely at a level that I haven't been involved with our last election. So tough process, but exciting.
Awesome, thank you for that update. 11.2 student school board representative reports. There we go. Emily, why don't you start us off tonight?
Okay. So I don't have much to talk about tonight, but I do have a couple exciting things. My first thing is how yesterday Park hosted the Section 1 Act prelims and did really good. Parks, the diviners actually got a top 2 finish and will be advancing to finals next week at Simley, which is awesome. And on top of that, I guess the only other big thing was at the beginning of the month, Park had its annual Wolfpack welcome for incoming freshmen, and that was just a success as always. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Maya.
At Woodbury, this Saturday, we have a college planning event at the high school where students can hear from Minnesota State colleges and University of Minnesota colleges about PSEO and financial aid opportunities and just about their school, kind of an informational event. We have a bunch of recruiting going on at the school right now. We hosted a TEDx event last year, and so that's kicking up again where we're going to do it again. And so they're recruiting members of the team and speakers. We're also recruiting for Ultimate Frisbee. And we're currently voting for Winter Week coronation. Winter Week is next week. We end the week with a winter dance, so that's on Friday the 31st. Key Club is hosting a blood drive during Winter Week on the 29th, and the music department is looking forward to hosting the SEC Festival on Monday, February 3rd. We have school off that day, except if you're a music kid, and you perform. All the schools from our conference come. We're pretty excited to host that and to kind of flex our new band room. So yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Thanks to both of you. Hannah could not be here tonight, and so she sent her report, so I will read it for her. She was talking about at Eastridge, oh my goodness. Can't even talk.
It's difficult, isn't it?
Goodness sakes. Spring sports are starting with rugby and boys volleyball. Student registration has begun, and they are having Super Saturday on January 25th, where 10th and 11th grade parents are 10th and 11th grade parents on after school planning. There you go. They're holding coffee house auditions as they approach their winter week, February 2 through 8. Prom committee is working with Fairy Tale Fashion for food again, and one dress equals food for 1 month for a child, and then you can either shop or swap. She also mentions the SEC Music Festival coming on February 3rd, and mentions that the Link crew is going to be going on a field trip February 5th, and that Eastridge won the one-act competition with Medea yesterday and compete again on January 29th. So thank you, Hannah, for sending in your report. All right, 12.0, our future meeting dates. We have regular board meetings on February 6th and February 20th. 13.0, at the beginning of the meeting, we mentioned that we were going to be going into closed session, so I will entertain a motion to move to closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.03 for labor negotiations.
Second.
Hi. Okay, so moved by Simi, second by Sharon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and we will be probably coming back to make a decision. So we will be adding an action item at the end. Ay, ay, ay.
Is it your birthday today? Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
Happy birthday. We thought it was, but we weren't completely sure. So.
Yeah, what a great birthday party, a board meeting.
Yeah, no better way to spend it, right?
I have a twin sister too.
Oh.
It's her birthday. But I was 3 minutes old.
I know the struggle.
Oh, do you have a twin?
Yeah,
A boy or girl?
twin brother.
Okay, yeah. How do you guys get along well?
No.
We did not in high school. In fact, I look back, I feel very bad how I treated this. We got very close as we, but I feel horrible. The fighting we did, how I acted.
Yeah, my brother's not the nicest person, but
Yeah, hang in there. It'll get better.
well, have a great rest of your birthday.
Thanks. See you later.
ice myself here.
Was there a certain email I was supposed to look at?
No, not you.
Okay. Because.
No, oh, did you tell her? No. Did you tell her? No. We had three. Oh, I was going to tell you, look, I could text you here.
I know. Actually, because the camera first, you could see people in the back. You probably should move this out a little bit. Okay, probably. The next time you might want to do that. At first we could see the shadows through that.
No, it wasn't.
You know, wherever this is, however that camera angle is, they have the recycling in and then they zoomed in a little closer. So this is the best. Or either keep it zoomed in or maybe bring this out a little bit so behind it they don't see the window. And we can see whatever's best for the camera. Yeah, he'll review it and then they'll roll it. Let me know. Okay. Whenever you guys are ready. You good?
All right, so we are back from closed session, so I will entertain a motion to reconvene our meeting.
So moved.
Second.
So moved by Sharon, second by Pat. Sorry.
To
Simi?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Oh, it was by me.
Oh, gosh, sorry. Okay, so moved by Sharon, second by Melinda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And now we need to add our action item 10.3 to approve the wages and benefits for independent employees. So I'll entertain a motion to add 10.3.
So moved.
Second.
That was Pat. Okay, so moved by Sharon, second by Pat. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, now 10.3, and Kevin Witherspoon will join us for the independent employees contract.
Good evening. I'm here tonight seeking approval of wages and benefits for our independent employees. The wages and benefits for the 2019-20 school year will consist of a 1.9% increase in salaries and steps on the salary schedule, increase of insurance plans of 7.8%. VIBA contributions for the high deductible plan will increase with an increase of $800 for those who take single coverage and $600 for those who take family coverage. Additionally, the employer will contribute an additional $300 increase to TSA contributions. Administration recommends approval of this proposal.
All right. I will entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Sorry, who moved?
Pat.
Pat moved and Melinda seconded. Okay, sorry. All right. So all those in favor of approval for the wages and benefits for independent employees, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. All right. So you guys just eat those for tomorrow? Or you want to take some home to everybody?
I've got.
Yeah, but are you going to share? You can give those to the kids and...
Yeah.
We have to, Keith, do not go anywhere, we gotta do our picture.
Keith, yep, tomorrow.
Yeah, I hear.
I'll wait until I see if I get it all done. But yeah, this one is good.
Okay, so they went to
Look at this. I know, I saw, isn't it cute?
Yeah. It wouldn't be cute on me, but...